Anchor text: The Birchbark House by Louise Erdrich. Selection illustrated by S.D. Nelson. Omakayas is returning home from an errand. She carries scissors for her mother and a lump of sweet maple candy for herself. Both the scissors and the candy are rare and valued items in her Ojibwe village in 1847. She is not eager to return home to the chore of tanning a moose hide and to her older sister Angeline, who made fun of her earlier in the day. Her feelings are hurt, and she wants nothing but to be respected by Angeline. So Omakayas took the slow way back, looking for odamin, little red heartberries, in the sunny margins of the woods near the ground. She carefully removed the hard lump of sweetness from her mouth, stuck it back in its leaf just inside the pocket of her dress. Just as the taste of maple sugar faded along her tongue, she bent over, pushed back delicate leaves, and found masses of plump, red little berries. Ah! 1, 2, 3. She'd eaten a huge handful. Another. She grinned, thinking that she'd allow her sister to return with her to plunder them, but only if Angeline changed her ways. All of a sudden, a rustle, and then a thump in a bush ahead made Omakayas freeze. A long moment passed as she stared through the dark leaves. Suddenly, crash! 2 bear cubs burst from the bush and rushed pell-mell, tumbling head over heels straight for her. They came on in such a hurry that they didn't see Omakayas until they were nearly in her lap, and then, with comical looks of shock, they tried to stop themselves. One flew flat on its face, bumping its nose and squealing. The other twisted in mid-air and landed in a heap on the ground, shaking its head in confusion at Omakayas. The bear boys looked at her. Slowly, she put out her open hand, filled with heartberries. Curious, the cubs jumped forward, lost their nerve. They scampered backward, and then crept forward shyly again. The smaller cub seemed slightly bolder and sniffed at Omakayas's hand. The bear cub took one berry, then jumped away in seeming fright at its own bold act. But the taste of the berry seemed to banish fear. The two now tumbled at her, growling mock ferocious. Their long pink tongues touched up every berry from her hands, eagerly flicking them from her fingers as fast as she could pick. They seemed to like the game. It could have gone on for hours, that is, until she stood upright. Then they tumbled backward in alarm. Their chubby bottoms rolled them over like playing balls, and she laughed out loud. She realized they had thought Omakayas was their own size. They were astonished, the same way Omakayas had been the first time she saw the trader Cadot unfold a seeing glass, something he called a telescope, a long, shiny tube that grew in his hands. She bent down again. "Anin, little brothers," she said to them kindly, and they came forward. She looked around. No mother bear. Omakayas was well aware that she shouldn't stay so close to these cubs, but after all, they seemed deserted. She looked around again. They were orphans. Perhaps the mother bear's skin was now draped across old Tallow's bed, although she hadn't heard about a recent kill. But still, no mother bear in sight. And these little ones so hungry. Wouldn't her big sister be thrilled when Omakayas returned with these 2 new brothers? Eagerly, Omakayas began to plan out her triumphant walk back to the house. She would enter the little clearing with the cubs, one at her heels and one before her. Everyone would make way impressed. She would lead the bear cubs around the fire 4 times before she presented one of them to Angeline, who would look at her with new respect. There was no warning. One moment Omakayas was wiggling a leafy stick, making it move on the ground so the cubs would jump on it, biting fiercely. The next moment she found herself flipped over on her back and pinned underneath a huge, powerful, heavy thing that sent down a horrible stink. It was the sow bear, the mother, breathing on her a stale breath of decayed old deer hides and skunk cabbages and dead mushrooms. Awa! The surprising thing was, Omakayas realized later that although she had no memory of doing so, she had the scissors out of their case and open, the sharp ends pointing at the bear's heart. But she didn't use them as a knife. She knew for certain that she should not move. If the bear began to bite and claw, she would have to plunge the tip of the scissors straight in between the bear's strong ribs, use all of her strength, sink the blade all the way in to the rounded hilt, and then jump clear, if she could, while the bear went through its death agony. If she couldn't get clear, Omachias knew she would have to roll up in a ball and endure the bear's fury. She would probably be clawed from head to foot, bitten to pieces, scattered all over the ground. Until the mother bear made the first move, Omachias knew she should stay still, or as still as possible, given the terrified jumping of her heart. For long moments, the bear tested her with every sense, staring down with her weak eyes, listening, and most of all, smelling her. The bear smelled the morning's moose meat stew Omachias had eaten, the wild onion seasoning, and the dusty bit of maple sugar from old tallow stuck to the inside of her pocket. How she hoped the bear did not smell the bear-killing dogs, or the bear claw that swung on a silver hoop from old Tallow's earlobe. Perhaps the bear smelled the kind touch of Grandma and Mama's bone and sprucewood comb, her baby brother's cuddling body, the skins and mats she had slept in, and little Pinch, who had whined and sobbed the night before. The bear smelled on Omachias's skin the smell of its own cousin's bear grease used to ward off mosquitoes. Fish from the night before last night, the berries she was eating. The bear smelled all. Omachias couldn't help but smell her back. Bears eat anything, and this one had just eaten something ancient and foul. Hein! Omachias took shallow breaths. Perhaps it was to take her mind off the scent of dead things on the bear's breath that she accidentally closed the scissors, shearing off a tiny clip of bear fur, and then, to cover her horror at this mistake, started to talk. "No comis," she said to the bear, calling her grandmother. "I didn't mean any harm. I was only playing with your children. Gawin onjida. Please forgive me." The bear cuffed at Omachias, but in a warning manner, not savagely to hurt. Then the bear leaned back, nose working, as though she could scent the meaning of the human words. Encouraged, Omachias continued. "I fed them some berries. I wanted to bring them home to adopt them, have them live with me at my house as my little brothers. But now that you are here, grandmother, I will leave quietly. These scissors in my hands are not for killing, just for sewing. They are nothing compared to your teeth and claws." And indeed, Omachias's voice trembled slightly as the bear made a gurgling sound deep in her throat and bared her long, curved, yellowish teeth, so good at ripping and tearing. But having totaled up all of the smells and sifted them for information, the bear seemed to have decided that Omachias was no threat. She sat back on her haunches like a huge dog, swinging her head around. She gave a short, quick slap at one of the cubs that sent it reeling away from Omachias. It was as though she were telling them they had done wrong to approach this human animal, and should now stay away from her. Omachias's heart squeezed painfully. Even though it was clear her life was to be spared, she felt the loss of her new brothers. "I wouldn't ever hurt them," she said again. The little cubs, piled against their mother, clung to her. For a long moment, the great bear sat calmly with them, deciding where to go. Then, in no hurry, they rose in one piece of dark fur. One bear boy broke away, again tried to get near Omachias. The other looked longingly at her, but the big bear mother abruptly nosed them down the trail.